Okay, everyone, welcome to the web session about showing Asta Powerproject for the questions requested by ISG in the presentation on the in December. So my name is Richard Ormrod. I've got a background in the construction industry, know the product very well, and the first topic I'm going to be covering is risk analysis. So this was introduced in version 14.01 and is just a part of Powerproject itself. So here I've switched the screen. This is a Powerproject plan. I think you'll all recognize that. I've got sections of a work breakdown structure that I'm showing on the left hand side in the project view, and I've got it color banded, and you can see that the project is destined to end on the 8th of August next year. And I've called this target completion because this is a plan that I put together with reasonable durations, and we're going to consider about this is going to be our target program, and we want to consider what we should add to it perhaps to make it a contract program. And obviously people take a judgment about that, but one way is to think about risk analysis. So this view, this window, which is got in task per line mode, and I'm displaying a color code from a library that I've created called risk factor, and the red ones are high risk, the amber ones are medium risk, and the green ones are low risk. And I've just done this on whether it's in the ground or not. So the duration that I give an activity, let's say the demolish existing structures 2 weeks 2 days, you could say, well, how sure of that are you? And people think it's easier to give a 3-point estimate than a 1-point estimate. So you could say, well, the fastest we could do that in would be 1 week and 3 days, and the slowest it could possibly take would be 6 weeks. So you can express a range of possible outcomes and not just a single outcome. The problem with that is if we change the given duration, if we think that, well, that's actually, we've re-estimate the amount of work involved, it's 4 weeks, that doesn't change the duration that you've typed in. So you do have to type that in. So a different, and I would suggest a better way of doing that, is that we can have a entries in a library, and they can have a name that is between that has got a percentage value and a dash and another percentage value, and this represents the lowest and the highest percentage around the given duration. So we can dispense with the ones you type into, and we can just choose it from a library in the usual way, drag and drop, assignment or whatever. So that takes care of estimating what the duration of a task might be. And the other question that we need to have is what distribution might we have for the choice of those durations. So if I've got a non-linear one like 50 to 200, if I choose a normal distribution, then my given duration of 2 weeks 2 days won't be at the peak of the normal curve. The extents will be given by the percentage. If I choose skewed normal, then the peak of the selection in a distribution will be at 2 weeks and 2 days. So if you need more on that, look in the help file. There's also a probability that this might occur at all. So we could say it's only going to happen 50% of the time as opposed to all of the time. But that is the situation that we need to set up. So you need to populate these fields as you go through, and if you took the default as being skewed normal, which I always do, if you just said this is high, medium or low, then you wouldn't have to do very much more work than you do now. And once you had done that amount of work, putting those values against an activity, on the project tab is a button called risk analysis. And I'm not going to go into the full detail of this really, because that's we can do that another time, or using the help system, but there's a couple of tabs, and the most important thing here is how many iterations are we going to do, and I'm going to do about 50 just for speed really of this presentation, and you should do about 1,000, and 1,000 would take on this project about 12 minutes, although we have some plans to speed it up, which is not excessive. And every time it does one of these, what it's doing is it's choosing a duration for each task from the range of possible outcomes using the distribution of that, and then it's rescheduling the whole project and remembering that, and then it's doing that again and again and again. So the idea being that you don't just get one answer, you get a range of possible answers about what the outcome of this project would be. So here we have a table of those, and so we can see that as a number, but we can also see that as a graph, which is much more influential, and we can print that graph. And so the green, the yellow band is actually where our current duration is. So we've got virtually no chance of achieving that. We do have some chance, probably about 5%, but the mean would be around about the 19th of August. So we said we're on the 7th, so that's another 12 days, and this is including weekends. But between the standard deviations, that's 50% of the results. So if we wanted to be sort of 75% sure, then we'd probably go for the 27th or the 28th or the 29th, and so 75% of the time we could deliver that project on time. If I was the client, I might take a view that I wanted to, if I was Tesco's, I was opening a supermarket and needed to be open for the festive period, I would want 100% probability that it was going to be completed by say the end of November or whenever it was. So I might take a different view. So it's the view that you have about risk and how you can use it. But if we said, well, okay, we're going to go for the 75 percentile, then we could find that percentile in the list, and we might have one or we might not. So we haven't done enough. So we've only got 74 or 76. And I'm going to take a greater view of, I want to choose the, I want to be 90% sure, so I'm going to choose the 29th of August, and I'm going to, from that result, I'm going to create a baseline. So I'm going to create a baseline that's I'm going to call 90%. So you can remember this result, of course, and I'm going to name that baseline so I remember that. So then I can return to the project, and if I click cancel now, I lose those results. I would have to do it again. But if I display that baseline, so I can see the I could show the 90% baseline. So there we have it, and I should probably change the color to make the 90% one stand out. So we make that amber, for example, and only show that one, not the other one. Then that's the result of running it at that difference. So if I then look at the and I think another thing we get out of that is which is a very useful metric is something called the criticality index. That's how many times has this activity out of all of the iterations been critical, expressed as a percentage. So if I were to sort on that, then those with the highest value are going to be critical most of the time. So even ones that I regarded as medium risk here, roof finishes, are coming up as being extremely likely to be critical, even though they might have some float in this particular target program. So it is a useful metric, an extra useful metric about which are the most important tasks to keep an eye on in that sense. So, but the use I'm going to make of that is that I'm going to go to the end of my project here, and knowing that situation, I'm going to create a new milestone on the 29th 9th, I think I said, of August, and I'm going to restrain that at that point, and then I'm going to create another task here. I'm not going to worry about the duration of this task. I'm going to link it to these two items here, and I'm going to make that new task into a buffer task. And a buffer task will expand to fill the gap after I reschedule. So once I reschedule, then you can see we've got a 2-week, 4-day, and probably that needs to be an end milestone at the end of the day rather than the start of the day. But I've got a way of marrying my target completion and judging what the difference should be to the contract completion. And on an NEC contract, we can keep it like this. On a JCT, you might be nervous about doing that and want to extend the durations of certain activities to fill in that sort of virtually 3-week gap. So I think there's a role to play in that, because we can then monitor the if we look at the buffer durations of this activity, we've got these additional fields, and we can see how long the original duration was and how much of the buffer we've used as we go through the project. So it's a good metric of doing that. So that's the mechanics of risk analysis. So you do have to fill in some extra information about the range of possible outcomes. Make sure you've got a distribution, but you can have a default, so that's not necessary. You then have to use the risk analysis option, and one of the benefits you get out of it is the criticality index as well as various reports. If the project were to change, or after you bid and won, then you could still resimulate at the 75 or the 90 percentile that you went in at, and you'd have a way of re-estimating what your risk profile was going to be. But it's quite subjective and difficult to perhaps convince people, but it is a tool that is valued and used in the industry. So that's the information I wanted to show you about the risk analysis. So now we're going to go on to schedule robustness, because if you don't have a robust schedule, then it's difficult to really make much use of the risk analysis, because it is based on what you're going to do. So I've got the same sort of projects here, and the first thing I'd like to point out is if I look at the reschedule options, then there is a report that most people turn off, but I would encourage you to turn it on at least once and examine the project after you reschedule and tell you what it gives you. So if I now reschedule the project or any part of it, it then gives me a result, and I said to put this in my browser, but it could be a file, and you get a lot of information that's actually quite useful. So it's telling you about the health of your project. There's just information about where it's all come from, some statistics about the number of links and activities and those sort of things, and what things might be restrained or settings, the main settings that the reschedule's working on, any errors it comes across, which you would know about. But I think the important things to look at here are the number of activities that are open-ended, and that is, they don't have a we've got 2 tasks or milestones that have only got incoming links. So which are those? So it tells us which tasks they are. So these have got no incoming links, so we can find them. So they're all the ones at the beginning. So that's sort of like what we would expect, and so that's okay. We could put a milestone called start on site, link those through to that. So we'd expect a minimum of 1 thing, and the other thing to look out for is how many have we got with no outgoing link. So so we've got 2 of those, one of which is the end of the job, and the other is a milestone marking an important event. So again, these are the important things. Everything should be linked, and you get a list of constraints, so you can see which ones have been restricted in some way. and you can get a report on the milestones, where they were before and after, and lists all the critical tasks. And if you've got a longest path, it'll list the longest path as well. So it's a very useful report, and one that you should really be looking at least before completing a schedule. So I'm going to turn that off so it doesn't appear all the time. But the other thing we've got now, we've got some extra logical information that's included in this release, which gives us some analysis after we've rescheduled. So once I have rescheduled, I've got this extra metric called the critical path drag, and you only get a value on those activities that are critical. So I've got a task here that's 2 weeks and 2 days long. It's got a critical drag of 2 days, and what it's saying is if we reduce the duration of this task by 2 days, then it will no longer be on the critical path. So or more than 2 days, in fact. So if it was so if we reduce this by 3 days, so it was 9 days long, and we reschedule, then that task is no longer critical. So if we wanted to reduce the task and get things off the critical path, then and reduce the length of the project, this gives us a metric that we can work on, which previously we didn't have. So again, a very useful tool to help us focus our attention on the most important things. And also we've got another number called the cascade activity number, so we can resort on this basis, so we can sort on this basis, and it gives us a logical precedence and sequence of events that groups like activities in their longest grouping. So for a review of logic, it's a very good way of seeing how things are hanging together. And also talking about how things are hanging together, we can take an activity and we can right mouse click on that activity, we can select that activity, and on the view menu there's a path to show me all those tasks that are linking into this selected ones. What are all these things that are driving this individual task? So as a way of reviewing the logic on that, that's a really good way. You have to turn it off, and we've got the reverse of that. We've got path from. So we've got from this point onwards, what are all the things that are connected to this task and being driven by it. So I'm talking to a trade contractor about if they're going to be late, the impact of that is going to be on all of these things, and I can discuss that with them. So that's again a very useful new addition to the lexicon of Powerproject. And the other thing that I'm going to show, and I think I've already set it up from previously, is if I just reset that and reschedule. So there is a new constraint. So I'm still producing a reschedule report, which I thought I turned off. Probably undone it. So there's a new restraint. So I've got a task here that's 5 days long, and if it was in some circumstance that it had to happen it couldn't have a weekend in between, it had to happen in a whole week. So maybe there's some special adhesive that's got to go off, or some attendance that has to happen constantly. You can't leave it for 2 days. There's a new restraint type that if we look at the properties of that task and constraints, called must complete within. And if we choose work pattern, that's a whole week. If we took shift, that's a day. If we took time period, that's whatever you've defined a day as, half a day as being, could be an hour or less. So it's quite sophisticated, and once that setting's made and we reschedule, then it's going to make sure that that task sits in a time period that it's going to be uninterrupted for the calendar that it's associated with. So again, a very useful tool that's just been introduced, but again, a way of having a robustness, and you might have noticed in the reschedule report that was listed. So so that's the information that we want to talk about. Schedule robustness. So it's you've got to do that anyway. I would contend you definitely need to do it for risk and cause and effect. The other thing I was asked about was resources and costs and work rates. So again, if we look back at the schedule that I prepared, that's got quite a few things, and I suspect that many of you know all about this, where we've got resources that you can create in the library, and they can be hierarchical, so we can see we don't have to have a big flat list, and it can be quite extensive. Resources themselves can be costed and have work rates associated with them, and you can drag and drop from there onto activities. But if I just said how many of these resources we need, then we can do that in a column, and so the purpose of that is that we can see a variety of different graphs on screen, and whatever we print is what you see on screen. So I've got a graph here that's just for carpenters, and this one I've got for all of the resources that we've got currently assigned in the plan, so I can have all of the resources. So it's a difficult thing for a main contractor, because obviously you're subcontracting it, you're not dictating how many people are going to be needed, but you should have a reasonable idea, because you've got a need to think about welfare and prelims and the number of drying rooms and toilets, and that's depending on the number of people. So if we said that on the site office canteen I needed 4 people, 4 carpenters to be in attendance, then you can see that appears on the graph down below. And for services we need a couple, and for demolishing existing structures we also needed a couple of those. So at some point there I've got a warning down here, I've been over allocated, and that's because I've used 8 people, and I've only said in the library I've only said that I've got 6 people available. So if that was true, I can reschedule the program with resource leveling, so we can squash down that over usage, and it potentially delays the project depending if there's any float on those activities. So obviously nobody's going to delay the project for the lack of a couple of carpenters. If it's a subcontractor, you've sort of offset the risk, but at least you know how many people you're going to have. But you might think about that resource leveling for materials and the hoist, craneage lifts. Can you get this amount of plasterboard into the building in the time given? You know, those sorts of resource, critical decision resources. But whatever you see on the screen is what you're going to get. You get the resource histogram when you print it out. You can have the resource histogram in its own window, and you can print that out independently, and you can export the numbers behind that into an Excel sheet. So quite a lot of functionality in that, and a majority of our users would make some use of that. They'd also, a minority of our users would do something with money, and so we can put costs, what we're going to pay people and what we're going to get paid. So this might be a step too far, but I think it's got a role to play in progressing. So if I said the site office canteen is going to be 22,000, you can see the graphs down below change, so you can see a cash flow. So this is our cumulative S-curve of expenditure. I've got a one that's sliced by month, so this is my projected future valuations, and I've got one below here that's taking my income away from my costs, so that I can see the break-even points and how much I need to fund this project for, and we can see we just need to get about 200,000 to the end of January, then we get our first major payments, and then we're virtually breaking even until the end of the job, and we're going to make a 237,000 profit. You're probably not going to use it for that, but I would urge you to think about money, because when I talk about progress, this has got a role to play in earned value. The other question that was asked was about work rates. So again, it's something you can put into Powerproject. You can say what the total quantity of work is. So there's 8,000 cubic meters of excavation. Given it's going to be 2 weeks and 2 days, that means you're doing 660 a day, and you can set the unit of that. So if in fact we could only do 500 a day because we've got to change the method, then it's going to calculate how long that's going to take for us, or it could say if you're going to do it in this sort of period, what sort of output rate are you going to achieve. So there's some role to play for that that people use, but that's the story, as I say, about resources, costs, and work rate. So I want to talk another little bit now about tender event schedule and linking other documents. So I'm going to go back to Powerproject, and I'm going to close this file. Just because I've got so many tabs I get confused, and I'm going to open one that I made previously, because I want to talk about procurement and possibly design. If you're doing design, you're going to have a hierarchical structure in our program that is design, procurement and construction, and we've been focusing on the construction bit so far, but there is a procurement bit, and that procurement bit looks like this, but it's coded in a different way. And so I've got a another view that shows me what happens. And this is about letting your packages, and this is what people call tender event schedules, and that's really what this spreadsheet is, although it's not colored up in different ways. And we have made specialist macros for people to export from Powerproject, create a colored tender event schedule, obviously because it can be baselined. But these are the packages that you're letting, and the color coding is coming out of a library that I've called lead times. So we've got a milestone that is really what we're after, because that's when we need the design information from the client or from the design team. So if I filter out and show only milestones, this is what I can give to the client and say, you've got to hit these dates, otherwise you're going to have an impact on the works. And I can show you the impact on the works because I'm going to link it into the program in a way that you can't if this is just a spreadsheet. So we get the design information, then we have a period where we go out to tender, and that's the out to tender date is shown here, and then we give them a certain period. Then we need a time to select which is the best candidate. Once we've selected and issued an order, they need some time to do working drawings which need to be approved or commented on by the design team, which we give them a period for. Once that's happened, then things need to be procured, made, whatever. Finally, they need to mobilize, and at that point, they can deliver it to the site, and the work can start. And we've got a logic link here that links into our construction phase, and you can see that link here on screen as a, and I'll highlight that. So here you've got a link at this point, and you've got another link at that point. So that link there is sloping backwards, and it's going to have an impact on this activity here. So so if we were to reschedule this program, we could see what impact that would have on the plan. So if I again, if I reschedule this program, then you can see that has an impact. And if that's delayed and it was critical, you could show that impact. So many people will at least plan the procurement as well as the tender event schedule. But we can also link various items to these other external documents. So if we created a column which has got something called related documents into it, then we can have a hyperlink to where that information might be stored. So if I were to find a document that we could open, so I'm sorry that I haven't prepared this in advance, I meant to do that, and let's find something. So we need both a path name and a file name. We can't navigate to it from within Powerproject, but if we say that's the folder that the information is going to be in, and then this is the file name that we're going to have. I'm just doing this off screen on my other screen. So there's information. If we then alt click on that, that's going to launch that file, and it's opened on my other window, and it's opened in this in whatever, it could be a web page, but it's a hyperlink. So it's a link to another document. They can be stored in Powerproject and then you just got to alt click on them to launch them. And that's in addition to inserting documents as other objects on the body of the program. So I can insert another Windows object. So if I were to take the same file as I had a moment ago, and display it as an icon, then the PDF is not supported. Okay, so I need to do that with a Word document, for example. So let's just quickly do that so you believe that that's going to work. So that's the document itself, and there's the icon that is in Powerproject, and you can size that and link that to an activity. But if you double click on it, it's going to open that particular document in Word. There you go. So it can be done, and there's a role for that to play when we talk about progressing of photographs. But you can see that's got an issue there. So that's the information that we were going to talk about in relation to tender event schedules, that they're called, and linking. And now I want to return to the whole topic of progress and project controls, because that's probably the key to a lot of it for most people. So we might make a plan, as we've done here in our scheme. We might analyze it, and at some point we can say, yeah, we've won this job, and we're now going to progress it, and we're going to move forward. So I've got a different tab with different columns, so we've got actual starts and finishes, and percentage, and planned percent, remaining duration, finished variance, and schedule performance index, which is an earned value token. So the first point we should make is, before we start, we definitely need to make a baseline. So we need to make a snapshot at this moment in time about what our original intention was. So this might be our contract plan. So we might do this, we certainly would do this at significant times, like an extension of time, for example. But people often do it monthly as well. But the point about that is, of course, as teach your grandmother to suck eggs, we can't change the yellow one. We can only change the live activities, and so that allows us to see what the variance is between these two things. And of course, the baseline itself can be a bit embarrassing, particularly if you're a sort of contracts manager trying to defend the program. So you can turn it off. It doesn't have to be visible, but the impact of changes can still be seen. So I'll leave it on so that we can see what's going on. And the other thing I'd like to point out are the importance of progress periods. So I'm going to add a new progress period, and to do it in the project view is a new feature in version 14.02. So I'm going to say we're going to update every couple of weeks. So that's week 1 and 2, and the end of week 2 is going to be the 20th of November, and I want this line and shading to be green, let's say. So so I've created that, and I want that to be the progress period that we're going to use on screen. So I'm only showing that particular progress period, and when I do that, this column was then populated. So it's saying where the progress line would cut through the demolition, we should be 50%. It doesn't matter where the task itself is, it's where it cuts through the baseline. That's the planned percent complete at that particular time. And then we're going to go through and say what the actual, either just what the percentage is, and that's popular, doesn't move the task, but I would contend you should be recording actuals behind that line. So maybe we didn't start the site office canteen until the 8th, so we could put that in or type it. We still finished on the 16th. So your actuals, of course, can be different to your baseline, and that's the key point. Unless you're collecting actuals, then you don't know what happened. You know what you did, but you don't know when you did it, and that can be important in any further discussion. So we'll say that we've done slightly less of the demolition than we thought, so we've only done 25% of it, so we've broken off 75%, and that's what remains to be done. That's the remaining duration, and that could be edited and say, no, we think we can do the remaining duration in 1 week and 3 days, but that's not going to change the percentage. So these two things don't have to be connected, they can be connected. And we haven't even started the excavation to reduce level at all. So what does that mean? So that means if we were to reschedule that, we can show the impact of that, because we're going to put all uncompleted activities ahead of time now and see what impact that has in the future. And so it goes. So you could do that. We could create another progress period. And the point about having new progress periods is that you can remember the value that you put in each time you enter it. It's not overridden in the way if you've only got a single value. So if we say time has moved on, this is now our progress entry period, this is what we should have done, we could now go through the program saying, well, yeah, we did the demolition, but in fact, you know, they didn't really finish it till the 2nd. So you've got an exact record. You're not just saying they've done it, you're saying when they've done it too. So you would do all that business. So you can do it manually by entering it into Powerproject. You could copy and paste into some of these cells, but the other way of doing it is to do that remotely. So as some of you know, and some of you have seen or are using, we've got a mobile app that runs on iDevices like iPhones, iPads, Android devices, and this is Windows, a Windows phone, so that you can see it. I have previously exported a project, and I'm just going to close this and show you that project so it's familiar when we look at it in a moment on screen. So so this is the project I've made. So we've got we have progressed it previously, and I've sent it out to be progressed remotely. And the point is that I'm asking people to update the bit in this stripe here, this sort of mustard stripe. I'm saying I want you to tell me what's happened by the 5th of December. That's my future progress date. And so if I don't have things, if things are outside that stripe, like these activities, they won't be in the list to progress because they're outside that range. This will be because it's in the range, but this won't be. So if I think I might get ahead of myself or do things out of sequence, I can put a further period, and you can make that as wide as you want. And again, in that blue stripe, anything that falls in that blue stripe will be in the list to progress. But we don't want things in the far future in the list to progress, because we're asking people remotely, possibly section managers, site managers, to and we don't want to burden them with something to do that they don't yet really need to do. So if we look at the what I've exported on the phone there, I can use the phone and you can see that happen. So I've got an icon, so I can tap on that icon, launch the application. I need internet connection at this point. I see the project's been sent to me to download. I tap on it and it downloads it. That's the only time you need a connection. I then have a list of the same activities that are in the project, and if it's got a red cross, it should have been done. If it's got a exclamation mark, you would be in progress at that time, and then you can suppress these clues, so some people don't want to give people a hint, and then you can say what's happened to them. So you can say that you've done a certain percentage by dragging in 5% increments. You can tap here and enter a more precise value. You can enter actual dates down here. So we should have finished it on the 28th, but we didn't finish it till the the 29th, so we can record actuals. And if it wasn't complete, we could also record date, remaining duration. But the other thing we can record is we can add notes from a pick list to save typing, or if you want to, you can click on the plus button and you can make a free note, and if you've got the ability to talk to it, it could translate into there for you. And also you can take photographs which can either be made or you can add them from the camera roll. And yesterday I think we took that one. No, it wasn't yesterday, but that's a picture we've made on our phone, or we could take one, and then you've got an explicit photograph of what happened at that time. So we can continue that, we can do that to the next task, etc. So that's what we need to do for each task. When we're happy, it's the end of the week, we upload that information and it's gone from our phone, and it's then available to update in Powerproject. So that's done by a control panel which essentially imports and exports that information. We see which ones are ready to be imported. There's the one I've just made. I then import that. I was saying that that was going to be back in November, wasn't I? So that was the I think I said the 27th. The 11th. So it's got me there. So I've imported that information, and we can look at the impact of that. So again, we've only done one task really, but it's come in here. It's got an actual date. It's got a little yellow diamond in the corner, and that's because it's got a note attached to it. So that note is what I just typed in. So if I scroll along there, you can see 14th of December, today's date, subcontractor issue, because that's what I chose, and that's where the photograph goes. The photograph is a hyperlink like we looked at before. We can alt click on that and it's going to launch that on screen, so we can see. It's going to associate that photograph with this activity, and obviously best to put that on a network drive everybody can see, even if you move the project. But you've got those abilities that really help a lot. So so that's another way of getting progress into Powerproject. So but really I want to look at the impact of one that we've already done so far. So too many things going on here, I think. Just take a minute because I'm not in the office, so it's trying to find a remote printer. So here's one I made earlier with multiple progress periods in it, and the point is you don't have to show the colors. You could show all the lines, but you also get, if you put money in the scheme, you get another measure of progress, which is schedule performance index. So if it's one or more, you're on schedule. If it's less than one, you're behind schedule. You're behind the value, the earned value in the baseline. So we've only done 0.5 of that, and so it gives you a sort of cumulative value, and I'll show you in a minute you can graph that. But I would contend this should cut everything behind time now should be actual dates. So it's we're saying if we were late, we're saying if we started early, etc., etc. So project managers don't like that. You've got to go into a meeting against the contract program. So that's where the jagged progress view is a really useful feature. It's been in the product for ages, and that's where we take the baseline and we paint onto the baseline the progress percentage. So you see a jagged view. So where the line jags ahead, you're ahead of schedule. Where the line jags behind, you're behind schedule. So people like that view because it's not changing the initial position of the activity. So I can say, well, look, I'm a bit behind here, but we've taken remedial measures, we'll catch up, it won't have an impact on the end date, and I can defend that for as long as I can. But the reality is this situation where we've got a knock-on impact and we can see that if we don't do something, we're going to be a week late. Now, whether you sell that internally or externally is up to you. Those features are available. But the other thing I would encourage you to think about is, and again, this is included in version 14.01 and has always been available as a free add-in, which used to be called Progress Expert. So if I can graph either money or just activity days, but it gives you a cumulative measure of progress. So against one of your baselines, and there's not a lot of change here, so we're not going to see a big change, but you do get a useful metric. And if you use progress periods, I believe you get a trend. So let's just let that run through. It's going to open, it's going to write an Excel file, and we're going to see that in Excel. So let's look at the second tab. This is a graph of the data that's come out of Powerproject's baseline. So we've got the baseline color, which is the planned, and then you've got the actual, which is the sort of orange, and a projection of what that means. So at this point, at the report date, those two don't meet. It's such a small difference that you can't see it, but it's visible here in numbers. So at the report date, we planned to have achieved nearly 89 cumulative activity days of critical and non-critical parts of activities. But all that we've done is we've only earned, that is the amount that those activities in the baseline have been done, is 81 days. So there's a difference. We're lagging behind. That difference can be expressed as a value. Effectively, that means we're 3.2 days overall behind, which is 0.68% of the overall project amount. So this gives you are you doing the right amount of work? And if you use that on money, then obviously you can weight different activities. But the trend per progress period shows you that overall percentage and how it's changed in time. So we started off the project a little bit slow, we caught up, we were virtually on time, and then things have started to go wrong. And if we monitor that and we start to pick up again, it's going in the right way, or is it all going south? And for that to work, really, you need to have progress periods, because we can remember what happened in the orange bit differently as a value to what happened in the green bit. And if you don't have those, it doesn't matter about the colors, but it does matter about being reasonably organized in entering progress. So I wanted to show you those different aspects and make you aware of both the remote app and the EVA graphing, used to be called Progress Expert. So that's the end of the presentation, and if you've got any questions, I think you all know how to reach me, and do let me know if I can help further.